Hello, I am Mandy Horn, the Traveling Compass, a travel agent with Global Dream Vacations, and coming today to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, food. We're going to be talking about food at all-inclusives. And if you don't know what a travel agent does or why I might be talking about food in all-inclusive resorts, it is in fact that I do professional travel planning. So like you might have a personal shopper for clothes, I am basically a personal shopper for travel. But it's a free service, so you should talk to me about your next trip. Anyway, today, now that we have a little bit of here for everyone to jump on, we're going to be talking about all-inclusive food. Now, if you've ever read a review of an all-inclusive site or a particular resort, you will find that the reviews on food range like wildly. You'll have one person say the food was amazing and they've never had anything better, and you'll have one person say it was utterly awful and they can't believe anybody pays to eat here. So what's the truth? And I get asked this all the time by clients because they get scared by what they read on reviews online. And of course, you can have people who in the States would tell you because they like certain food genres or not, would not review a restaurant well. But you're spending a lot of money to go to an all-inclusive and you want to make sure that you're going to enjoy the food. How do you get there? And what I find from the reviews is typically that people who hated it, my guess, made one of the 3 top mistakes you can make eating at an all-inclusive. So we're going to go through what those are today, so you don't have to be one of those people that's miserable the entire time you are at an all-inclusive. You will be able to enjoy your food and find the best food available at the resort. Because the truth is there is bad food at every all-inclusive and there's good food usually at every all-inclusive or every good all-inclusive. But you may be committing one of the cardinal sins of all-inclusive food and then ending up all the time with stuff that is nasty. So top 3 mistakes people make at all-inclusives. The first one we are going to go through is not ordering enough food. Now, I know that sounds crazy. You're like, you're at an all-inclusive. How can there not be enough food? Well, all-inclusive portions are small, generally speaking. So like at a dinner, at a specialty restaurant at an all-inclusive, you may have appetizers, entrees, small plates, and desserts. And they will come in, generally speaking, very small portions. And this confuses some Americans. We have some of the largest food portions in the world, probably the largest food portions in the world. And they're used to like Cheesecake Factory portions that are utterly insane and could feed a small family in pretty much anywhere else in the world. But they come here and they get this little plate and they're like, oh gosh, like they're not giving me enough food, and they're trying to skimp on what I paid to be here, and that's not the case. What they are trying to cut down on food waste. No one wants to be raking all this stuff into the trash, and you have people who have been at a place where they have been probably eating and drinking all day long, and so people tend to order more than they can actually eat, and they're trying not to just waste food on a massive scale. So they will give you something that is small. Now the trick here, is to order more. It's an all-inclusive. This is the good news. And I'm amazed how many people don't do this. If you have a particular food that you like, order more, even up front. I've been at all-inclusives with other people who will order 4 different entrees because they actually want some of all of it. And they know it up front, and they just tell their waiter up front to bring 4. So that ordering on the back end can take a long time. They're not really set up to do that. So if you're nervous about it, order 2 things on the front end. It'll be a lot easier and you'll get your food a lot quicker. But let me give you an example here of what this could look like. So over here, this would be like a typical portion of a tuna tartare at an all-inclusive. And so you might be going, I'm getting like 3 little pieces of fish if this is what you're used to in the States. And this would typically even sometimes be shared by a couple people. But if this is what you're used to getting as an appetizer for tuna tartare, you may not be happy with this. If you're ordering something in particular that is expensive, meat-based, tuna tartare, beef, whatever, go ahead and order more than 1. This is what you should expect. If you want more than that, just order more up front. So order enough food so that you can be happy. So avoid the mistake of not ordering enough food by ordering more upfront. Okay, so next mistake that people make is ordering American food. Okay, now I am a self-professed foodie, to be honest with you. So yeah, you'll get that part. My slant goes that way. I love food. I've eaten at some of the best Michelin starred restaurants all over the world. Love, love, love food. Also love typical ordinary food as well. But I am somewhat picky, and when I go and eat at different places in all inclusives, I am checking the food for you guys to see how my clients might react and what they need to know about eating. And one of the things that you can do to make yourself absolutely miserable is to order American food at an all inclusive. Every all inclusive will have, over here, your big list of sinners. That's going to be over here, chicken nuggets, French fries, hamburgers. Those are so ubiquitous in American diet. Everybody knows this, and every all inclusive has them because Americans love them and eat them, and because a lot of kids eat them. Those tend to taste the same kind of pre-packaged frozen nasty that they do everywhere else. Like if you order chicken nuggets at a Mexican restaurant in the United States, that's what you should expect at the all-inclusive. Otherwise, don't get these items. I have people that live on these and they're like, the food wasn't very good. I'm like, oh, that's what you ate? So those items are not going to be great. Hamburgers might be a surprise to people, and we can talk more about this. But large cuts of beef or thick cuts of beef are fairly American. French do it too, but most countries outside of the US do not do thick cuts of beef, and they don't cook it well. Hamburgers are like that. They're very American. Most other countries, while they have McDonald's or other things, it's just not something that's super familiar to them. And you tend to get something that tastes like kind of a bad fast food burger. I am somewhat of a hamburger connoisseur. I absolutely love hamburgers and have eaten them at several all-inclusives, only to find that they're always fairly ordinary to bad. So they would not be an item I would order at an all-inclusive. They're just not done well. Up here, what may be surprising, chicken breast. Americans love chicken. And we are pretty much the only country that is as obsessed with chicken breast as we are. I was at a grocery store one time talking to an Indian man, and he was just gotten to the States, and he asked me, he's like, what do you do to your chickens here to make them be this large? I don't know. I probably don't want to know. Please don't ask. But big honking chicken breast that we cook or grill is just not something that a lot of other countries do. And chicken breast dries out horribly. It is not a fatty cut of meat, and you will regret it. So they will serve it because they know that Americans like it, but it almost never tastes right. It's almost never cooked properly, where it's not dry and hard. If you order chicken breast, you will probably be disappointed by what you get. Next up, and this can be surprising, thick cuts of beef. I talked about it with the hamburger, but thick cuts of beef are unusual outside of the US, and most times they can possibly cook it right, but the beef will not taste like American beef. Now, there are certain resorts that import their beef, and in that you may get something more similar to an American concept, but most places, this is just not something that they do well. And so if you are hoping for, St. Elmo's Ruth's Chris type of steakhouse experience, you may be really, really disappointed in the beef and just how it tastes. They also tend to cook it with more oil, and so it's not, it can come off kind of greasy. Sometimes the fat doesn't render properly off of the steak. So this is just something that, across the board is very difficult to replicate outside of the US, and it's not something I typically order. Or if I do, I'm ordering a second entree as a backup because I am preparing to be disappointed, hope to be pleasantly surprised, but I can be disappointed. So thick cuts of beef. And then lastly, very sweet, sweet desserts. Americans eat sugar like nobody's business, and no one else pretty much in the entire world eats sugar like Americans eat sugar, where their desserts are ultra, ultra, ultra sweet, like huge piles of frosting and that kind of thing. It's just generally not something that anybody else replicates well. And so, in fact, you can see they'll have pastry that looks absolutely gorgeous, and you will get it and you'll put it on your plate and you'll start eating, and you'll be like, this tastes like cardboard. Or just something's wrong. It looks right, but what's wrong is it will not have the sugar content, most likely, that you are used to for a baked good, like a cookie or whatever. And you may be like, kind of disappointed. So super, super sweet desserts are not something that you will generally see. So what can you do about it? How can you avoid the mistake of ordering American food? What can you order that you will enjoy? And what you can do is to order different foods that other countries tend to prepare well. American food, a lot of times, is very bland. There is no spice to it. And it's pretty low key on the flavor profile. And nearly every other country is not like that. I mean, maybe Great Britain, maybe that's where we got it, but nobody else is like that. So what you can do is order, and these are my list of things that are great options for you to order to enjoy your food. Seafood, if it is local to the area, if they are used to preparing it, usually you're at a beach at an all-inclusive, seafood is a great win. They know how to cook it. They cook it well. It's fresh. It's delicious. Go for it. If you love seafood, you will have a good time. So seafood, braised meat. Now this is how most meat is prepared outside of the U.S. So long and slow cooking, anything like that is like stewed or cooked in a sauce where the meat gets a chance to break down all the tough meat, that kind of thing. That tends to be how locals cook in their own lives. And it's what they tend to do best at all inclusives. It's also the most forgiving on things like buffet or things that are being cooked in mass quantity like they are in an all inclusive. And braised meats will be a win. Stir fries, fajitas, teppanyaki, anytime meat is cut in a small piece tends to do better. You tend to get better flavor. So go ahead and those kinds of dishes. Bone-in or fatty meats, chicken thighs, bone-in chicken breast, that would be a win versus the boneless chicken breast. Those types of meats hold up better when they're cooked in mass, hold up better on buffets. They come out juicy and delicious and not dry and overcooked and nasty. Those tend to do better as a flavor profile. For desserts, tropical fruit. The fruit is outstanding if you're by the beach usually. Ice cream tends to go over well. Custards are oftentimes a win. That is something that usually outside of the U.S. people do pretty well. Those or quick breads, you get sometimes like banana bread and that kind of thing. You can find some good options. Now, your all-inclusive may do pastry great and you may really enjoy the desserts, but those are typically your best bets for a good win. Also, there tends to sometimes be like a cart food or specialty, like they'll bring in someone to do jerk chicken on the beach. That tends to be good. Or anything that is prepared in front of you. So when you go to the buffet, like getting an omelet for breakfast while you're standing there saying what you want or don't want, usually a great option for getting something that you'll love, as well as if they have like a carving station or they're doing pasta for you a la minuto. Those are fabulous options because you can also talk to the person making it and say, hey, I love spice or I love X. What would you recommend? And then sometimes they'll be like, oh no, I know exactly what you want. And what they will cook you may not be what they would cook for everyone. And they've customized something that you can really enjoy, even though you're eating at the buffet restaurant. So talk to the people who are behind the counter. Hopefully you're at a resort where they're well trained in English. And they can kind of customize some of that for you. And you may find yourself with a much better food option. So instead of ordering American food, order what locally is done well, and you will find that you have much better food quality than what you might otherwise. Then next up, for the last cardinal sin of how you end up with food that you hate is eating at the wrong restaurants. So let's talk about this. All-inclusives tend to have like a buffet that you eat at during the day and then specialty restaurants that you would eat at night. Now, most people don't know that across the board, certain ones tend to be better than others. So how can, I will give you my definitive ranking on how you should choose your specialty restaurants and what is good or not good about them. So, frowny face. Okay. Mexican restaurants at all-inclusives are made for Americans. They are Tex-Mex. They are not real Mexican. So you may go, I love like real authentic Mexican and I'm in Mexico. Surely this will be great. No, pretty much almost never. Maybe at some of your super, super high-end resorts, but usually it's awful. It's insipid. It's not good. Think like a bad Mexican restaurant in the U.S. That's, typically how the Mexican restaurants are. No, maybe you'll love it, but usually it's not that great. So I would avoid the Mexican specialty restaurants. It's just, they tend to make Tex-Mex and then make it for Americans on top of it. And usually it will lack flavor. It won't be cooked right. It'll be soggy. It's just not that great. So avoid Mexican. Also, beach food. Okay, so lots of all-inclusives have like little beach huts, we serve hamburgers, hot dogs, French fries, I don't know, whatever else out on the beach. If that's usually almost not that great. Now it's great if you're super hungry and you've been sitting on the beach, maybe you don't care. But if you're trying to avoid some of the worst food, one, I already told you to avoid hamburgers, but two, it's just usually not that great, whatever they're serving at the beach shack. So no, it is what it is. If you're looking for a snack because you're hungry before you walk back to your room, or you don't want to back to your room, great option. But otherwise, you're not going to find the best food there. Next up on the, maybe not so much would I go there, would be the local cuisine restaurant. And this surprises some people. They're like, Mandy, you told us to go eat local. And I went to the Jamaican restaurant at the all-inclusive, or the Caribbean restaurant at wherever, or the Mexican, which we already talked about, restaurant, at my all-inclusive. And it was awful. And that's because they take what is normally a wonderful dish in their own culture and change it for the American palate. And they make it bland. They take the spice out, and they up the meat content. And then it's usually not good. It ruins everything good about the dish. And usually the restaurants are disappointing. Now, sometimes, like I said, there's exceptions, but in general, you're just not going to find the best food there. So I would avoid the local cuisine restaurant. I would pick it above the Mexican, but I would avoid the local cuisine restaurant. Next up, and this could surprise you, would be the buffet. Now, the buffets often where they'll get a bad rap, like the buffet, like that's what no, there's a lot of carving stations, or like we had already talked about, the prepped to the minute for you that you can help customize or ask for or kind of work around. You have a lot to choose from at some of the bigger buffets where you can really find something that you would enjoy. So the carving stations, the specialties of the day, those all tend to be really, really actually fairly decent. Stuff you're getting in the carafes or in the giant silver things, like, again, go back to what I said on the previous point, bone-in meats, that kind of thing, if you're going to get something out of the big silver bin. Otherwise, I'd hit the carving stations. Then next up, Italian, pizza, and Mediterranean. So some will have a pizza restaurant, or sometimes the pizza is part of the Italian restaurant, or Mediterranean. General, those kind of all blend, and they all kind of get a different name at different all-inclusives. Tends to be the next best up. Pasta is, in fact, hard to screw up. Ask anyone what you teach someone learning to cook. Spaghetti is often one of the first things because it's hard to screw up. And it's true across all inclusives too. Those tend to be fairly consistent things that are pretty decent to eat, and I would hit those up next up. Then the top rated at nearly every property restaurants that they have will be the French, anything that is Asian, Indian, and their seafood restaurant. These will tend to be the top three, and also usually the hardest to get into at your all-inclusive if it takes reservations. If it doesn't matter. Those tend to be the three that are the best. French, because it requires someone who is well trained in order to do it. So typically they have some of their better chefs at the resort cooking there, as well as the fact that it's most similar to a lot of Americans like to eat. So their French restaurant tends to do really well. Asian, also because especially teppanyaki, it's a great show. People love it. They love the enthusiasm. And you're getting those little small cuts of meat like we talked about again. That helps. So Asian tends to come across really well. And the seafood, of course, we've already talked about that. Native to the area, usually very fresh, very, very good. Also usually a win. The wild card that I put up here is the steakhouse. And that was for reasons we've talked about earlier. You just never know what you're going to get. So if they import their beef, that can be a really great experience. If they don't, it can be pretty miserable, and you can find that the steaks are thin, oily, undercooked, or not that great. So something to consider as you're picking where to go. If I were to go to a steakhouse, I would kind of maybe hedge my bets on what I order. But on top of that, here's another hint, kind of what we talked about at the beginning, on ordering more food. If you get done with this and you decide, I didn't like my dinner, go somewhere else. It's an all-inclusive. You can get more, and I have done that. I was at an all-inclusive a couple weekends ago. We ate at one place and it was kind of so-so, and we're still hungry. And we went somewhere else and ordered a different dish, and it was much, much better. So, always something to consider when you're going through, the restaurants. You can always go eat somewhere else. Anyway, if you have anything that I can help you with, that's my big 3 tips for all-inclusive eating. The 3 cardinal sins you can commit is not ordering enough food, ordering American food, and eating at the wrong restaurants at the resort. But if you have any other questions about eating at all-inclusives, that is what I do. And I'd be happy to talk to you. My email is up here. And you can email me. I do complimentary travel planning. Happy to talk with you. Thanks for tuning in today. And you can have any questions, please leave them for me in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thanks. Have a great day, guys.